Scientists have unearthed a 100-million-year-old dinosaur fossil in WA. The Elasmosaurus is commonly found across inland parts of Australia not so long ago, about 140 million years ago.
Imagine discovering a dinosaur in perfect condition. Well, archaeologists have found a creature so exquisitely preserved that it appeared to have just fallen asleep millions of years ago. Like a sleeping dragon, an average rock was among the best-preserved dinosaur fossils ever found in 2011. How did this discovery happen, and how did it startle archaeologists' world of knowledge? Let's investigate it. Nodosaurus. For Shan Funk, a heavy equipment operator at the Millennium Mine in northern Alberta, today was typical 2011. As he toiled, churning over the ground, the air hummed with the continuous buzz of machines when something odd grabbed his sight. One unusual pebble with an odd color and design had fallen free. It did not follow the others. Curious, Sean stopped his machine and moved closer to take a look. "What's this?" he murmured, brushing away the dirt. The rock seemed to gleam with something beyond its surface, an unwritten story waiting to be unearthed. His supervisor came over, took one look, and his eyes widened. "That's no ordinary rock," he remarked. And he was right. When paleontologists arrived and carefully began their investigation, they discovered this wasn't just any fossil. Hidden among the layers of time was an ancient creature, a lizard-like dinosaur so well preserved that it looked nearly alive. Its scales and armor seemed undamaged by the millions of years that had passed, like a sculpture created by nature itself. "It's like it's sleeping," one of the experts muttered in astonishment, staring at the fossilized body. The creature was revealed to be a nodosaurus, an armored dinosaur that roamed the Earth some 110 million years ago. Measuring 18 feet from nose to tail and weighing roughly 3,000 pounds, it had survived through unthinkable eras in a condition so pure that it boggled even the most seasoned scholars. What made this find truly astounding wasn't simply the dinosaur's shape, it was its intricacy. Unlike most flattened fossils during the fossilization process, this one was maintained in 3 dimensions, as though frozen in time. The plates of its armor, the scales on its skin, and even its keratin protections were still there, revealing truths that had long been hidden. When experts inspected the fossil closer, they found even unexpected shocks. Tiny amounts of red pigment survived in the remains, allowing them to reconstitute the dinosaur's hue. This ancient giant sported a dark reddish-brown tone on its upper torso, which faded to a lighter shade below. "It's like we're seeing it as it was," said Jacob Vinther, a paleontologist from the University of Bristol. And if that weren't enough, the insides of the dinosaur had also been preserved. Bits and parts of what lay within had survived the passage of time, adding another depth to this incredible discovery. Today, this nodosaurus lies at the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Canada, where visitors can marvel at its prehistoric appearance. Sue. Furthermore, when people talk about dinosaurs, they generally speak of giants preserved in time, remains of a world long gone. Among these ancient findings, one name regularly comes up: Sue. If you've never heard of Sue, let's fix that. She's no ordinary fossil. Sue is a Tyrannosaurus rex, but not just any T-Rex. She's got a story that begins with a flat tire and ends with scientific fame. It all started in the summer of 1990. Sue Hendrickson, an American explorer and fossil collector, was out in the rough wilderness of western South Dakota with a small team. They were seeking fossils, as one does in such terrain, and had already uncovered the remains of an Edmontosaurus. Spirits were high as they toiled, scratching away layers of rock to expose ancient secrets. But life, as it frequently does, had other plans. One of their trucks developed a flat tire. While the rest of the group proceeded into town to sort it out, Sue Hendrickson decided to make the most of her time and walked at the base of some nearby cliffs. "I'll just see what's out there," she murmured, as explorers often do. That's when it happened. Small shards of bone caught her eye, scattered across the ground. Most people might have rejected them, but Sue knew better. She crouched down and ran her fingertips over the antique pieces. Something sparked in her mind, a sense that this wasn't simply any finding. Her instincts were right. Those scattered fragments led her team to find one of the most complete and well-preserved T-Rex skeletons ever unearthed. "It's a T-Rex," she called out when the realization hit. The dinosaur was named Sue to the individual who first noticed her. What made Sue so extraordinary was her completeness. Around 73% of her bones were intact, 250 out of the 360 known T-Rex bones, a rarity in paleontology. By bulk, she was around 90% complete, an astounding performance given the constraints of fossil preservation. 7 years later, Sue's path took another twist. She was sold at auction for a jaw-dropping $8.3 million, a record at the time. The sale stirred up excitement and debate, but it ensured that Sue would find a permanent home where she could be studied and appreciated. Today, Sue stands tall in the Field Museum in Chicago, offering visitors a glimpse into the majesty and mystery of the T-Rex. Preservation of Nodosaurus and Sue. The nodosaurus wasn't precisely a creature of rivers and seas, it was meant for land. Yet scientists believe water played a significant role in its story. The hypothesis goes like this: something, a flood, a collapsing riverbank, maybe even a frantic attempt to avoid a predator, led this dinosaur into a river. Once there, its body likely floated downstream, kept buoyant by gases piling up inside. The stream dragged it eastward day by day until eventually the carcass reached the sea. And then what, you might wonder? Well, this is where things become interesting. After roughly a week of drifting, the body burst and sank, crashing back first onto the muddy seafloor. The impact stirred up large layers of dirt, which immediately covered the dinosaur like a protective blanket. Over time, something remarkable happened. Minerals seeped into the skin, armor, and even the smallest pores of the dinosaur's body. This method kept its original shape, resembling nature's mummification approach. Layers of sediment gathered on top, forcing it further into the ocean below. Millions of years later, what should have been lost forever was waiting beneath the surface, ready to be uncovered. Here's the twist. If the Nodosaurus had floated just a few more feet over the ancient sea, it might have fossilized far beyond the mine where Shan Funk found it. And if it had sank a bit earlier in its voyage, it might not have been kept so nicely. With a few simple tweaks, this treasure could have been missed. As it turns out, water played a similar function in Sue's life. Scientists think Sue the T-Rex was coated with mud and water immediately after her death. The fast burial kept scavengers away, saving her bones from being scattered or gnawed. How were these fossils stored? Before modern technology provided freezers and preservatives, people had to think outside the box to protect their food from deteriorating. You've got to get inventive when there's no canning, no chemicals, and certainly no freezers. And that's exactly what our ancient ancestors accomplished. Take the hunter-gatherers of nearly 11,000 years ago, for instance. Imagine a troop successfully hauling down a mammoth after what must have been a hard hunt. The hard-won flesh couldn't just go to waste, but what could they do to preserve it from spoiling? The answer was found in something unexpected: water. Hunters would throw the mammoth corpses into neighboring ponds and lakes. It wasn't a spontaneous act, they knew what they were doing. The tiny pond's frigid waters, low oxygen levels, and the peculiar bacteria present there slowed down the breakdown process. "You mean to tell me this meat will still be good in months?" someone might have said back then, marveling at how the meat lasted through the colder months. And it did. Stored in the autumn, the chunks of mammoth meat kept edible until summer, albeit they had to be removed before the water warmed up. Scientists have even tested this method, not with mammoths, of course, but using deer, lamb, and horse meat. And indeed, it worked just as it did thousands of years ago. But the water wasn't the only trick up their sleeve. Another ingenious option was concealing food underground. Without sunlight, heat, or oxygen, deterioration slowed dramatically. Think of it as nature's larder, buried away beneath the dirt. Then there's the bog, a tactic that might raise some eyes today but made great sense in its time. In northern Europe, ancient inhabitants learned that bogs were good for storing food, even butter. Dakota. Sometimes nature pulls off marvels that leave even the greatest minds scratching their heads. Take Dakota, a dinosaur mummy unearthed in North Dakota. The moniker matches the place, but what made Dakota truly special wasn't just the bones, it was the skin. Yes, real dinosaur skin, perfectly preserved. How could this even happen? Scientists wondered as they studied the fossil. Usually, mummified dinosaurs come about in one of two ways. Either the body is buried shortly after death, sealing it away before nature can take its course, or it lies in a dry, arid region where deterioration slows to a crawl. But Dakota's tale didn't fit either of these patterns. This dinosaur lived in a humid habitat, and when her time came, she was near a water source, a spot where scavengers would have been fast to feast. Logic would imply her skin should have withered away, but it didn't. For years, this was a mystery no one could solve. It wasn't until lately that scientists pieced together an explanation. Sometimes nature turns unexpectedly, even in the most improbable locations. In damp conditions, little scavengers, creatures like insects or rodents, can burrow into a corpse. And that helps preserve it, someone might ask, eyebrows raised. In a way, yes, a paleontologist would reply. These tiny animals open up roots for gases and liquids to escape. As a result, the skin begins to dry out before it can degrade properly. Larger predators also play a part, but not in the way you'd imagine. When they go after a carcass, their attention is on the muscles and organs, the portions packed with nourishment. The skin, often disregarded, ends up as the final piece standing. Through this process, what's left is a form of natural preservation. The skin and bones dry out, deflate, and can last for generations when covered by soil. It's like dehydrating fruit, remove the moisture, and it stays delicious for much longer. In its way, nature found a mechanism to preserve Dakota intact, leaving behind a fossil that felt like a gateway to a civilization long gone. Blue Babe's mummy. Not all ancient wonders find their way into museums or are neatly stashed away in private collections. Some have extraordinary stories that break all expectations, like Blue Babe, a bison who lived not one but 2 lifetimes. The first chapter of Blue Babe's life ended some 50,000 years ago when he roamed the cold plains of what we now call Alaska. His journey took a sad turn when he met the fangs of a lion, an end that could seem ordinary in the wild, but fate had more in store. When winter blew in, Blue Babe's remains froze solid, buried in the permafrost for millennia, untouched by time. Fast forward to 1979, his mummified body, still strangely intact, was recovered from its freezing tomb. Scientists were astonished by the condition of his remains. His muscle tissue was still solid, resembled beef jerky, and his fat and bone marrow looked practically fresh. What do you even do with a discovery like this? Someone might ask, imagining meticulous research and delicate preservation. Well, you cook it, obviously. You may hear Dale Guthrie, the paleontologist directing the project, say with a chuckle. Yes, you heard that right. In 1984, Guthrie summoned guests to a unique dinner party in Alaska, serving only Blue Babe's neck. The meat was diced, boiled in stock with veggies, and transformed into a stew, a prehistoric meal if there ever was one. When the pot was finally done, a peculiar aroma filled the room. It smelled like a mix of steak, wet ground, and a hint of mushrooms. Some people hesitated, forks hovering mid-air. Are we really about to eat something 50,000 years old? One might have whispered. But spurred by curiosity and perhaps a little bravery, they dug in. To everyone's astonishment, the stew was so delicious that no one got sick. This wasn't the first time ancient meat wound up on someone's plate. In 1901, explorers along Siberia's Berezovka River stumbled and discovered a completely preserved mammoth. It was so well kept that grass was still tucked in its teeth. Some of the meat found its way to a feast, where gigantic steaks were described to be soft and tasty. But let's not kid ourselves. Eating ancient flesh isn't a walk in the park. Over hundreds of years, time works its mischief. Fat transforms into a soap-like substance called adipocere, or corpse wax, which smells as horrible as it sounds. Muscles, meanwhile, lose their texture. Ice crystals grow inside the threads, breaking them apart and leaving something sticky and yucky. Scientists in Russia once tried to cook mammoth flesh. The result? A foul-smelling stew no one could stomach. Ancient salty water. Scientists have always wanted to turn the banal into something extraordinary, or downright weird, case in point, drinking old water. The practice isn't some weird tradition for researchers working in frigid, distant places. It's an issue of practicality. When you're surrounded by glaciers and the closest tap is hundreds of kilometers away, you make do with what's at hand. I've had my fair share of glacier water, a lecturer from the University of California may casually say over a gin and tonic. It's not every day you get to sip on something that's thousands of years old. Climatologists dealing with ancient ice cores sometimes take it a step further. Imagine a long cylindrical piece of ice being extracted from the Earth, each layer a time capsule of our planet's past. They're like nature's soda bottles, tiny gas bubbles trapped within fizz and pop as the ice melts. Add a chunk of that to your drink and it's like sipping history, an Oregon State professor jokingly remarked, remembering when he converted a 40,000-year-old ice core into a drinking glass. It wasn't precisely intentional. He needed the center hollowed out for his studies. Are they still sipping from a vessel older than most human artifacts? That's something to write home about. But here's when things take a turn. Not all ancient water is as fresh and pristine as glacier melt. In 2013, scientists uncovered something extraordinary, a pocket of water buried 1.5 miles beneath the Canadian surface. This wasn't your average ancient drink. This water was a stunning 2.6 billion years old. And how does the world's oldest water taste, you might ask? Terrible. It's saltier than seawater, thick like light syrup and undrinkable. It's like licking a salty rock, someone might say, grimacing. Why is it so salty? The water had spent millennia reacting with nearby rocks, absorbing up minerals that converted it into a salty, mineral-rich stew. Though initially transparent, it would turn a rusty orange once exposed to air, attributable to its iron concentration. Scientists didn't drink it for fun, of course. The tasting was easy to measure its saltiness. No sophisticated lab testing was needed. The comparison is hilarious for those who've had glacier water or even Antarctic ice in their drinks. I'll stick to my 100,000-year-old cubes, thank you very much, someone could joke. A woolly mammoth. In August 2010, on the freezing southern beaches of the Laptov Sea, a team of researchers uncovered something extraordinary, a woolly mammoth so well preserved it felt as though time had paused mid-step. They called her Yucca. She had been trapped in the ice for an estimated 35,000 years, some say even closer to 39,000. Her story is one of survival and sorrow, with specialists putting together how she might have met her end. They pondered, visualizing her struggle in those final moments. She could have fallen into water or gotten stuck in a bog. Her lower body, preserved in frost, conveyed one tale, but her torso and legs, gnawed by prehistoric carnivores, muttered another. But here's where it becomes genuinely astonishing. Despite the millennia that had gone, Yucca's body held something no one expected: liquid blood. It's like nature's antifreeze, one of the scientists marveled, holding a vial of that ancient crimson fluid. The discovery prompted an idea, a crazy, daring concept. What if Yucca could help bring her kind back to life? Researchers have been chasing the fantasy of recreating the woolly mammoth for nearly a decade. With improvements in genetic research and a little aid from Yucca, that ambition is likely plausible. The plan? Combine Asian elephant DNA because they're the mammoth's closest relatives, with mammoth genes for features like thick fur and cold resilience. It's not cloning exactly, the experts say. Instead, they're producing a hybrid, a creature part elephant, part mammoth, but fascinating. This isn't just about recreating an ancient behemoth for the sake of curiosity. There's a greater picture here. If brought back, mammoths might aid the Arctic in ways we never envisaged. They'd knock over trees, stomp the earth, and create grasslands, slowing down permafrost's melting. Who knew woolly landscapers could help fight climate change? Someone quipped, half serious but fully hopeful. Tasmanian wolf. And if the massive experiment succeeds, it won't stop there. Scientists set their sights on other extinct animals such as the Tasmanian wolf. Unlike the mammoth, the wolf's departure feels like it happened yesterday, 1936 to be exact. It was the last of its type, dying away in a Tasmanian zoo. But with its genome mapped from museum specimens, there's hope that this striped predator might someday wander the wilds again. There's a catch, though. While the body can be rebuilt, the spirit, the behaviors, the instincts, the sounds, might be lost forever. What did they sound like? A yip? A growl? One researcher wondered aloud. The truth is, no recording equipment existed back then to tell us. The Tasmanian wolf that comes back will echo what once was. The golden time capsules of Earth resin solidified over millions of years, capturing everything from insects to feathers, preserving them as if time decided to take a snapshot. Amber fossils have been nicknamed nature's freeze frame, displaying creatures mid-flight, mid-run, and even mid-meal. But for amber to perform its magic, so much has to go right. The resin must fall to the ground, escape being destroyed, and get buried in the proper conditions. Millions of years pass, pressure increases, and ultimately the resin becomes amber, conveying its small secrets to our time. Finding amber fossils isn't just luck, it's a succession of coincidences over eons, and yet here they are, in the hands of scientists who marvel at the veins of an insect's wings or the glitter of a fly's eye, fixed eternally in golden light. As scientists continue to peel back the layers of history, who knows what further secrets the Earth might yield? These ancient animals may someday cradle even more elements of life we've yet to imagine. What are your thoughts about it? Tell us in the comment area and subscribe to the channel.